Hi everyone, welcome back to Desert Isle Forge. My name is Tim, and in this video I'm gonna make a sticking Tommy or miner's candle holder. Today's topic is related to my new land here in Arizona, since this used to be a mining camp in the late 1800s. This very spot where we're standing at is where the camp blacksmith was located at. The sticking Tommy or miner's candle holder was an item that the miners used to hold their candles down in the mine while they were working. A miner would get 3 or 4 candles for a 10-hour shift, and they stick it in this round part that held the candle, and there was a spike and a hook. The way they would use this, they would use the spike and hammer it into a crack or into the timber of the mining structure, or by the hook they would hook it on their hat and the candle would light their way. Now they normally use the candles just to find the ore, and then they put it out and work in the dark. There were several different types or designs. There were little nuances, differences. One was made out of 1 piece, the other one, like this one, was made out of 2 pieces. Some were made out of copper, and sometimes the mining companies, like the Tombstone Mining Company or the Comstock Lode in Nevada, they all had their name stamped on the side. To do the sticking Tommy, I'm going to use a 3/8 of an inch round stock. And first we're going to flatten the end to form the candle holder part. Then we create a short section that is about square-ish, and then we create a half round section that's going to be the handle part, and then we create another square section and then the point, and then we create another hook that is a separate piece, drill a hole and rivet it onto the main body. I'm going to make this fit a 7/8 of an inch candle. The first step in the process is going to be creating a roughly 3-inch long and 1-inch wide section, flat section, that's going to be the candle holder part. Then we're going to roll it up, and that's going to be the part that holds the candle, as I said. And just continue forging flat until we have the desired width and length and thickness. Now that we're satisfied with the length of our piece, I came to the horn of the anvil, and I'm going to create a nice radius, both sideways and the other way, both sideways. So basically I use the natural curvature of the horn and then created that nice radius there. That's a more pleasant transition. So we finished with step 1, which was creating the part that will hold the candle. We created a 3-inch long, about 1 inch wide, and about 1/8 of an inch thick flat area, and created a nice radius transition to the round section both sides. Later on, we're gonna roll this up and create the round disc, round ring that will hold the candle. The next step is to forge a short section here, transition from the flat to a square section, and then we're gonna use a open die hardy, which is a 1/2 inch half round, and pound that and do a transition from the square to a half round section. That's going to be about 6 inches long, and that will create the handle of the candle holder. You come to the horn of the anvil and just transfer a 1-inch long section from round to square. I don't care about the edges being too sharp. If it's a bit rounded, that's fine, because we're going to transition to half round anyway. Now that it's done, I'm going to go to the hardy and going to forge about 6 inches of this round section into half round. We have our piece here. I come to the hardy and just pound down into the 1/2 inch round. Make sure the orientation of the material is correct, otherwise you have to redo the whole thing. It's going to be would be hard to pound it to the other side. But now we're gonna take the edges off a little bit and then back. So now we turn from square to half round. When you do this on a longer section, you have to overlap your heats and overlap your forging so you don't end up with marks in the on the outside and the half round face of it. I marked 6 inches on this anvil so I can follow my length, and I'm halfway there. That's about 3 inches, that 2.5 inches the hardy, so I know roughly I have to do twice the length of that. And coming back and just keep pounding in the hardy. So this area of the property was the main mining camp. There used to be a building here, and the dump where the garbage and everything was compiled up. And when we discovered the forging area, we started to excavate it and discovered a lot of interesting artifacts. I'm gonna do a video on it and post it on Patreon. There's gonna be a Patreon exclusive, so if you follow me there, you can watch that video later in about a couple weeks. So you know, consider it and you'll have exclusive access to other content. Now we are almost at 6 inches. You have to give another heat and finish this section. And I think this is the last. Yep, it's about 6 inches long and about the right shape. You're gonna take the edges, hammer them a little bit, and create a nice profile. This will make a comfortable handle part. Now I'm gonna go and heat up the whole thing again and go over with this a smaller hammer, making it nice and smooth. It's already smooth because I overlapped my heats, but there is a little bit of an edge that I'm not so happy with. But I'm gonna just heat up the material, take my smaller hammer and go over it one more time to smooth out things a little bit. With the handle part, which is the half round section, we're gonna go to this section, so this area, and start to transform the round bar into a square section, and then we're gonna forge a spike that is gonna be the spike of the tenon. So we're here on the horn of the anvil and start to transition from the half round to square. I like to do these transitions, section changes on the horn, because it gives me a nice transition. Unless the design calls for a sharp edge, I like to have more of a radius or a less smooth curve. So we forged our little square section about 2 inches long, and now we're gonna cut the material at about 4 inches from the end of that square section, and that's going to be enough to forge our spike. And then we're going to forge the long, taper, and point. So we have our material nice and hot, put it on the hardy and just turn first 90 degrees and then around 360 and back. And then when we almost cut, we're just gonna strike next to the hardy, cutting the end off to make sure it doesn't fall on our microphone cable and doesn't burn it. So we're back to the 3-pound hammer and on the outside edge of the anvil and forging the point. I always start the long tapers and long points at the end, so material doesn't get overlapped too much, and then I go back and develop my entire taper from there. Alright, now our taper and point is pretty much done. Just gonna finish it off a little bit. I met up with the square section with my taper and have a nice, it's not even a transition because it's both squares, but it's a long and kind of robust taper. I'm taking the edges off because I like it that way. It doesn't create a sharp edge. And I'm gonna just make sure everything is straight, aligned, and not much twists in it, because that will just make the final steps harder, or forming of the shaping of the piece harder. So here is how our blank piece looks like. You got the 3-inch long flat area. There's about 1 inch wide with a nice little radius transition to a 1-inch long square section, and they have about 6-inch long half round and about an 8-inch long square, and tapered to a point. So this is not a super complex project, but you might need a little bit like intermediate skills to make this. Definitely good hammer control and the understanding of the fundamentals. The next step is to create the shape. The reason I did not roll this up before and create other shapes is when you forge these sections, if I rolled this up first, that might have distorted or deformed, and also would have been hard to hold it with the tongue or whatever. So first you're going to just make this blank, and then you bend the shape. Now I'm going to start with rolling up this to accommodate our candle, and then create the teardrop shape for the handle and fold it back on itself. Then I'm going to drill a hole and forge the little hooky part that will be the attached to the rivet here. To do the rolling, I'm going to use this bending fork that has a 1-inch fork. 1-inch round bar is the fork, and I'm just going to start and roll it around it. Now this is a little bit larger than what we need, but I'm going to just adjust that while it's cold. So this gives us a good start and a nice round shape. If you can get a 7-inch round bar, you can wrap it around it, but this works as well. The point of these is that these are adjustable. You nail this part or leave it soft, and then you can fit it to different sizes of candles. Some of them have little handles sticking out. I have one of those, the other piece, but actually this is good enough. I'm gonna wait until it cools down and try to fit it to the 7/8 of an inch candle. So now it's cooled down. Actually, it's almost a good fit. I'm just gonna close in a little bit, so when I try to squeeze in the candle, it will be a tight fit. And just roll it off a little bit until it's really tight. And I think it's good. I'm not gonna squeeze the candle in right now because it's gonna leave some residue and then just gonna melt and burn. But I think this is good enough. The next one, I'm gonna bend this into a teardrop shape and bend it back on itself. The way I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna bend this out a little bit, and then here a little bit, and then I'm gonna bend it back. It's important to bring these out first because it's gonna again be a little bit more difficult to do that. Every time you bend something to a teardrop, you gotta think about these parts. You're gonna hit each other, and then it's gonna be difficult to do that. So you're gonna bend this out a little bit and out a little bit, and then I'm just gonna use the same bending fork and create that shape. I'm gonna start with the candle holder part, and I'm using a very small hammer and just bend it out a little bit. And then I'm gonna, that's about it, and I'm gonna go back, heat up on this side and bend it. And now the other side, I'm gonna just bend it out a little bit. And I have a little bit of a twist in it, but I can probably mitigate that or fix that while I'm bending that in. So I'm gonna heat up the whole entire piece, and then I find the center and bend this back on itself. Here's the piece heated up, and Now we just start bending it back, giving it a nice little curve that gives enough room for the fingers to fit in there and have a comfortable grip. I'm gonna give another heat to the entire loop because, as you can see, it's not very nice, but we're gonna fix that by hammering on the side, closing this gap as much as possible and creating a nice little loop there. So we're gonna come here, and hope you can see from the fork, but you're gonna just hammer down a little bit here, pulling that material in, and then coming back up here and maybe on the horn a little bit. Sorry, you might have not seen that. And then come back here and hammering around, creating a nice little teardrop shape. It's just a matter of spending a little time and making it nice. You can also bend out a little bit if you're not satisfied with the shape, and then closing it in. Make sure everything is in line, no twists, everything is straight, and this is it for the main body of the sticking Tommy. Now we're gonna forge the hook and then we attach it. To make the hook, I'm gonna use a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch square stock, and I'm gonna forge a little tenon that we're gonna rivet into the other piece. I scored a little line with the Hardy. That's going to be our shoulder. It just helps us to find that nice spot and have a more defined shoulder. And then I'm going to forge this down. It's a little bit longer than what I need, but I'm going to just chop it up. So heat up and forge that tenon first. Now we're starting to forge our tenon. I'm just putting the those marks on this edge of this block, and I'm going slowly, bit by bit, trying to keep that shoulder in the center. Working this small is always challenging, so making that tenon part centered at this size is kind of challenging. You could just actually use a file and file off the corners and make it round. That's an acceptable option in my opinion. And just continue until we reach a desired size for the tenon, and then we'll take off the corners, make it round, and I think I'm going to make an 11 size 11 hole. I remember that was I was using before, and that looks like a good size. So let me finish this. I'm going to do it in a time-lapse manner, and then I'll come back to you with the next step. We forged the rough tenon. I'm just gonna go and dress it up with the a file, and I think a size 11, number 11 drill is a little bit too much, too large for the section, so I'm gonna use a little bit smaller, and I'm gonna fit this tenon to that, and then we're gonna cut it and forge the hook. So I'm gonna use a flat file and make the tenon fit the hole. Try to create a nice shoulder, and I'm gonna file it down until I'm good to go. I try to create a very tight fit because we weakened the material there, so we try to do, when we rivet it on, we try to have that material fill out all the hole, so it doesn't collapse when you hammer it into the rocks or the timber frame. So I'm just going to go around and bit by bit fit this onto fit the tenon into the hole. So now we created a nice tight tenon. that fits into that hole, and I'm gonna forge the hook and then come back to the vise and rivet it. Now I did off camera, I'm gonna just splice in a little footage of it. I drove a square drift punch into this hole, creating a little square profile at the end. That will help us to prevent the hook from turning. So when we rivet that in, that will fill out the square hole and instead of round hole, so it won't turn around. Now the tenon is done. I cut the length to 2.5 inches, and I'm going to forge a point about a couple inches long, so it gives us a 4.5, 5 inches long piece, and then you're going to bend it into a hook shape. Now we're just going to forge a point, and that's going to be the hook part that normally hooked on the hat of the miner. Or sometimes you could hook it on the timber structure as well. This can be somewhat pointier than the spike part because this doesn't have to be robust. You just have to be pointy. I'm going to also take off the edges because I like that kind of. I don't like having sharp edges in these kind of things. Just makes a more pleasant thing to handle. And just a little touch up on the this part, taking off the edges, make sure everything nice and straight before we start bending it. And the final step of making this part is to bend it. I'm using a small bending fork and try to not to bend the tenon too much, and just creating a nice little curve here. That would be the hook part that hooked on the hat. Actually, I overbent it, so I'm gonna just open it up a little bit. I want to go straight down with that part, so it gives a better hooking. So I finished the two parts of the sticking Tommy. Now we're gonna marry them by riveting the hook onto the main part. I already cut the to length. I left about a 1/4 inch of material overhanging that will give enough for a rivet head and fill that squared out hole. I'm gonna go to the vise and I'm going to use a acetylene torch to heat up the material. So here we are at the vise. I put the hook part into the jaws and placed the main part on it, and I just realized that I was in the wrong way, so make sure that orientation and direction is correct. So we're going to heat up that end of the rivet and use a very light hammer and rivet that on. So we're gonna heat up the entire tenon, and then we place our piece on top, give it a little heat, and get the hammer and rivet it down. Try to make a nice little head, and that's it. Alright guys, this is the assembled sticking Tommy. And here's our candle, and it fits nicely. So that's how it was used. This end go into the rock slit or a crack or the timber, and this would be hung on the hat, a special miner's hat. And here's another one that is made for a 1-inch candle. That I don't have those candles because they are made from natural materials and they melted in this heat. And these are pretty utilitarian items. I haven't seen any fancy ones like other kitchen utensils like the toasters, the forks, and other nice items. This is a fun project. It needs a little bit of intermediate skill because you have to have nice section changes, and if you make one, it's much easier. If you make several of them, that's when the good practice comes in, to make sure every piece is more or less the same size. if I would do more than one of them, I would do every step on all 10 or 20 pieces and then move on to the next one. So this is it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you like to support my channel, you can always like, subscribe, comment and share. Also, you can support me on Patreon. There are always new exclusive videos. You can also visit my website www.desertalforge.com, and I also have a web store. All the links are in the description and on my website. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.